All right, let's get started here. So good morning, everyone. I'm Sean Krause, Bureau Chief of Freshwater Fisheries. With fishery season right around the corner, it's a great time of year to get together and share information about what's going on within our programs, and also to get feedback from the angling public. It's great to see so many people in attendance. We did have nearly 350 members of the public register. As we get started here, the attendee list looks like we're only about 90 people right now, which I say only, but and that's compared to the total number of people registered. But to have 90 on already, I think is a really good number. So I'm going to continue to get started. Since the pandemic began, we switched to providing this meeting an entirely virtual platform. And this year we did consider going back to in person, but the record attendance over the last couple of years, with 1 to 200 people attending, was really a good thing. We wanted to see that number, continue to climb. When we held these meetings in person, the last couple of years we were only seeing 30 or 40 people for the northern meeting and the southern meeting. So to turn away from all those extra folks that could participate virtually was not something we wanted to do at this time. One of several advantages to this format is that we're going to have the ability to conduct instant polls to gauge angler responses to specific questions or comments. So for example, when we hold a public meeting and somebody stands up and voices his or her opinion, we look at that and say, all right, this is great. It's good information, public feedback, wonderful. But we never really get a feel for if that's the majority of opinion or if that opinion is in the minority. So one of the things I want to do is try out something new. I'm going to launch one of these instant polls. And as I do that, you'll see the poll question on your screen right now. And this sample question is, in what format do you prefer future public meetings, such as the Freshwater Fisheries Forum or the annual trout meeting, to be held? So if you could, please click one of the 4 options here. If you prefer the meetings to be held in person, entirely virtual, a hybrid with both in-person and virtual options, or either way is fine by me. And right now I can see responses. I see 65 people have voted. Now that's up to 70, 73%. We're up to 76% of participants have voted. And right now, this live information is really cool. We're seeing only 9% of the people preferring an in-person meeting. At this point, I see 36 looking for entirely virtual, but the majority is 46% right now are preferring to see a hybrid meeting, both in person with virtual options. Those numbers shift a little bit. We're now into 82% of the voting, 83% have voted. And as of right now, I am seeing 45%, the majority preferring virtual, the hybrid option, 35% entirely virtual, and only 10% preferring in person, and 9% either way is fine. So throughout the meeting, we're going to be using this virtual poll periodically in 2 formats. One, we may be posing a question to you similar to this, but also during the public Q&A period, we are going to be kind of trying to figure out whether or not an angler's comment is popular and is representative of the angling public, or if it's kind of a minority opinion. So we'll play with that a little bit later, but yeah, this is pretty neat. So I'm going to close the poll with 84% respondents. Great. So as we get started, I also want to take a minute to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have several speakers today, and we're going to ask you to stay muted throughout their presentations. If you have any questions, you may either type it into a chat bar. So we do have a slide for this to demonstrate how you may ask a question. As you can see here, you can either, the second bullet here is you can put a written question into our question box on your control panel, and there's an orange arrow showing you that. And we're gonna keep an eye, we're gonna monitor those questions as the meeting goes on, and then we're gonna try to address them during the question and answer periods. Also, if you're feeling a little bit more bold, you can raise your hand and you can ask your question verbally, just as you would in a normal public meeting. So if you prefer to use to raise your hand, you will be called on during the question and answer periods. You can ask your question, and then the most appropriate Fish and Wildlife staff will respond. I'd like to mention some folks that we have in attendance today. Some of our staff that will be able to interact with you. First off, I'd mention Fish and Game Council member and Fish Committee Chair Rob Pollock is in the audience. We also have Assistant Director and previous Freshwater Fisheries Bureau Chief Lisa Barno, who you'll be hearing from shortly. We have our Hackettstown Hatchery Superintendent Craig Lemon and his right-hand man, Crew Supervisor Tyler Tressler. We have all 6 of our fisheries biologists. I'm not going to name them by name here. I will address that in my later presentation. You get to know those folks a little bit. We also have staff from our bureaus of Information and Education, Law Enforcement, and Lands Management. And I really want to give a big thank you to our I&E staff. They've done a great job helping us put this meeting together on this virtual platform. We also have Marine Fisheries Bureau Chief Jeff Brust in attendance as well. So I guess at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce our Assistant Director of Fish and Wildlife, familiar face to most of you out there as our former Bureau Chief, and she will be available to answer a few questions upon completion of her updates. It's all yours, Lisa.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everybody. Really appreciate everybody joining us this morning. As you know, angler input has been incredibly helpful in guiding our agency efforts. I just have a couple of recaps from last year and also some ongoing efforts and issues that just wanted to highlight today for you. Hopefully at this point, you are all aware of our new website. That launched in August 2022. I know last year at the same meeting, we were giving you the heads up that we were working on it. This was a full-scale agency project. There are over 13,000 pages from our old website that not only need to be updated in appearance and content, but also had to be integrated into the new program WordPress, and it is also ADA compliant. I cannot express really how much effort this took on staff as biologists suddenly became web page designers. But we're really proud of the new look, as it's a big change from what we used to have. Our old website was kind of designed by the way our organization was structured. We have completely turned this around so that it is now more by user interest. So it's a lot to get used to, but we're hopeful that you are enjoying it and now finding it a lot easier to put information up. As always, we definitely appreciate any feedback and suggestions for added improvements. On our staffing levels, I'm happy to relay that our staffing is now up to 250 full-time employees. That's almost 30 positions higher than we've been in a number of years. So we're definitely looking forward to putting a lot more staff to work, and hopefully you'll be able to see that expansion efforts. Unfortunately, though, as our staffing is increasing, our license sales are trending in a different direction. Our 2022 freshwater license sales were at 162,272. That is a 7% decline from 2021. Our hunting license sales for 2022 were at 84,066, and that is a 5% decline from 2021. Now, some of this will be because we had that big increase in licenses from 2020. We saw a little bit still in 2021, and now we're starting to, level off with that. But one thing that we're hopeful that will help some of our license sales, especially towards fishing, is that there's going to be an upcoming bill in the state legislature that will fix an error in our buddy fishing license. As most of you are aware, this license discount provides almost a 50% off for those who bring in a new or lapsed angler into fishing, or for 2 new anglers. A lapsed angler is someone who hasn't bought a license in 5 years. However, when that legislation was passed, instead of a rolling 5-year time period, the statute had a set year of 2010. So each year, fewer and fewer anglers can take advantage of the discount. So now a lapsed angler is someone who hasn't bought a license in the past 13 years. But there is a bill going to be proposed that will correct this. And as you know, with the newer ELS system we have that can handle the buddy fishing licenses better, we're really hopeful with this pass. But we will need the anglers' support to make sure that this bill does get passed and implemented. On the boating front, we had a couple of boat ramps completed last year. Our lands management staff does an incredible job of maintaining access to waters, including boat ramps. Ramps at Stone Tavern, Rising Sun, and Point Pleasant were finished last year. I know there's probably those in the audience today that are wondering where we are with Greenwood Lake. We are still working on the design for Greenwood Lake ramp. We have had a couple of initial designs for a ramp at Browns Point, which is owned by and managed by our parks. But what we're looking at and trying to make sure is that we can fit in as much parking as possible. So we were having the last round of design reviewed again to that point before we finalize it. And coming up in the future will be a ramp at Jake's Landing, and there's also some initial designs on Belvedere. And I'm sure everybody's aware of our bear hunt last year. There was, in December 22, as a result of an emergency rule passed by the Fish and Game Council and approved by the governor's office, that temporarily enacted the 2022 Comprehensive Black Bear Management Plan. And that was as a result of a 237% increase in damage and nuisance complaints. That's what allowed us to have a hunt in December of 2022. But emergency rules are only valid for 60 days. So as of January 14th, the temporary CBBMP has expired. We currently have a rule proposal in to formally adopt the CBBMP, which is needed to allow a bear hunt to continue. The public comment period on that closed on February 3rd. We are still compiling comments, and the Fish and Game Council will need to review those comments and decide how they will proceed. I'm sure you're also aware that right after the emergency rule was passed, the Fish and Game Council was sued over the emergency rule, which affected, and we lost almost 2 days of the hunt, which normally the first day accounts for almost 40% of the harvest. That litigation is still ongoing. And then on a final note, sure many of you have heard in the news about whales washing up along the shoreline. These are mostly been juvenile whales, and after necropsy is performed, it's indicated that blunt force trauma that is consistent with boat strikes has been the cause of death. Believe these juveniles are moving into forage and bait more inland, and that's where there's a lot more boat traffic. So that's about the highlights I have for the agency as a whole. At this point, basically, if you have any questions that aren't relative to our freshwater fisheries program, I'd be happy to take just 1 or 2 questions to keep us on schedule.
Thanks, Lisa. So at this point, participants have the ability to ask questions in 2 different formats. One is through a question box, and the other is raising their hands. Eric will be reading a couple questions in a question box to you, and Scott will be allowing folks to unmute themselves and those that are raising their hands.
Looks like we have a question from Ronald Hilbert. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Ronald.
As we're waiting for Ronald, one thing I'd like to emphasize is there will be plenty of session today to ask questions. So if we could please keep the questions relevant to the speaker, in particular, that'd be great. Also, one other point I'd like to emphasize is we do treat this meeting as more of our warm and cool water fisheries meeting. So if you have trout related questions, I'll use this as a moment to plug our meeting next Saturday for our annual trout meeting. So if you can please hold trout related questions to our trout stocking program, if you could please hold them until next week, that would be great.
Ronald is unmuted, but you can go ahead, Ronald, if you have a question. So,
Ronald, you might have to unmute yourself from your end as well.
He is unmuted right now. So it might be, maybe there's a problem with his mic. Let's move on to the next question. Stephen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, my question is if there aren't any plans to do anything with the boat parking situation at Round Valley Reservoir. Currently, we lost with the new configuration. We lost a lot of spaces, and I think there's some modern architectural standards that aren't being met, and there's vehicles getting damaged because of those like standards and lack of room. I know people are pretty ticked off about it. I just figured I'd bring it up.
We can take a look at that. Right now, as we've been focused on with the project being finished, at the reservoir, but we can take a look at the issues there.
Thanks, Stephen. Next question, let's go to Joseph. Might have to unmute yourself again, Joseph.
Hi, good morning, Lisa. I'm glad you brought up the whales. I was concerned about, I'm an ocean fisherman too as well, and I was concerned about all the reports about beached whales, and everyone was blaming wind turbine. Is there anything about the wind turbine? And I heard that they've been wanting to do a slower speed for boats all the way to the Hudson Canyon to prevent that in the future. I'm not sure if you heard anything else about those two things.
I haven't heard anything else relative to, reducing the speed limits on the boats relative to this. I think it's probably a little bit too soon till we get more information collectively among the states where it's occurring, and then, look at and develop a path forward. And of course, public input will be important to that as well.
And the second part of the question was about the wind turbine. Have they heard anything about some sonic blasting sounds that have been messing with the whales?
From my understanding, the necropsies have all indicated a blunt force trauma, which would be boating strikes.
So I guess that shipping lane that's right there is the big problem when the whales are coming in close. That must be the problem there, that area. Thanks for answering.
Sure. I think to keep us on schedule, Sean, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Sounds good. One thing I'd like to also mention to those in attendance is that this GoToWebinar has a function that allows us to keep the questions that we don't get answers to. And we do have your email addresses. We can get back to you. So don't feel slighted if your questions don't get answered during the actual meeting. It's a nice opportunity for us to reach out to you via email to follow up. Moving right along, I'm going to give an introduction. I'm sorry, I'm going to give an update in regards to some things going on in freshwater fisheries. That has been pre-recorded. So I'm going to ask Karen to play that quick video for you. At the conclusion of that video, I'd be happy to take any questions relevant to the topics covered. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Sean Crafts, Bureau Chief of Freshwater Fisheries. We have a real nice agenda for you that I would like to share as we get started. I'm going to share with you a brief presentation on some fisheries updates, spanning a wide array of activities that we do within freshwater fisheries. Following my presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask me some questions. Followed by that, there will be additional presentations by other staff. First of which will be warm water fish production activities, and then there will be a question and answer period. Next will come a largemouth bass update with an invasive species update, and that will be followed by a question and answer period. As stated earlier, please keep questions relevant to the topic being discussed at the time, as there will be plenty of time at the end during the public question and answer period. That will be the perfect time to ask any fisheries programs questions that you may have, make suggestions, or voice concerns. And as for a reminder, this meeting generally serves as a meeting for our warm water and cool water fisheries. So if you could please hold any trout-related questions for our annual trout meeting scheduled virtually for next Saturday, March 4th. Please remember to keep yourself muted during the presentations. This goes for both the public and for staff. There will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions, and we're going to handle questions in two different ways. One would be that you can type your question into a question box. We will have a moderator looking at them, and during the question and answer periods, we will read a few of your questions and answer them to the best of our ability. Secondly, if you're a little bit more bold, you can use the icon here to raise your hand, and during the question and answer periods, we will call on you, and you can ask your question verbally live. Fish and Wildlife, we are proud of our rich history and longevity managing your fish and wildlife species and their habitats. This slide was recycled from last year with two obvious updates. You can see here that the 130-year banner was modified to show that we have been around for 131 years. And last year's digest contained an article focused on the Hackettstown Hatchery, now in our 111th year raising fish. And in this year's digest, we wanted to celebrate 40 years of trout production at the Pequest Trout Hatchery. Within the Bureau of Freshwater Fisheries, we have the two hatcheries, and we also have our Research and Management Unit. The Research and Management Unit consists of 6 regional fisheries biologists, 1 technician, and 1 wildlife worker, complemented by approximately 6 hourly employees, typically recent college graduates with a degree in fishery science, biology, or a related field. On the map here, you can see how each regional biologist's jurisdiction is laid out, and that's by watershed. This information can also be found on our website, but you can see on the list here on the left with our 6 biologists, each with a watershed in which they have a primary responsibility for general fisheries management. And then under that, each has a specific specialty. As you can see, Maria is our new trout stocking coordinator. Eric works with anadromous species and fish passage issues. Scott is our native fish species biologist. He does a lot of work with water quality and statistics as well. Justin is our new cool water biologist, working with muskie, walleye, northern pike, hybrid striped bass, etc. Ross now leads our efforts to manage wild trout, and he will also increase our efforts to manage lake trout and landlocked salmon, and he does most of our GIS mapping. Chris is our warm water biologist, and he is also our invasive species leader and our federal aid coordinator. This small team is responsible for the management of freshwater fisheries across the state, and as you can see from the map on the right, they keep themselves quite busy. Each dot represents a fisheries survey that was conducted during 2022. There are 135 surveys conducted across 106 waters. Of these surveys, 100 were on streams and rivers, and 35 on lakes and ponds. And to get an idea of a breakdown of the primary reason for each survey, 80 of them were on trout streams to assess the status of wild brook and brown trout throughout the northern portion of the state. 24 surveys were to assess warm water fish assemblages on lakes and ponds. 6 surveys were done specifically to monitor the presence and distribution of invasive species, and the remainder were for miscellaneous reasons, some of which were to study lake trout, hybrid striped bass, to assess restoration projects, and to assess native species. In addition to surveying fish populations, our biologists are heavily engaged in partnerships both with external stakeholders and internally within the agency. I don't have time to list the great array of partnerships here, but I just wanted to mention a few. We work closely with the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture, the New Jersey Statewide Dam Removal Partnership, and the Mid-Atlantic Panel of Aquatic Invasive Species, just to name a few. But internally, our fisheries staff work closely with nearly every facet of fish and wildlife, and we have great gratitude for our relationship with land management, information education, law enforcement, and the Endangered Non-Game Species Program, all of which we work hand in hand to accomplish many of our agency goals. Now, I know I said earlier that this meeting is held primarily for our warm water and cool water fisheries, but I wouldn't want to go without mentioning our trout stocking program, as how important it is to anglers in New Jersey. And I just wanted to get ahead of it and let everyone know that for the 2023 spring trout stocking season, we have a plan, and that plan is to return to normal. As most of you remember, during the pandemic, we made some necessary programmatic changes to get the fish out early and to spread out anglers. But I just wanted to reassure everyone now that trout season is right around the corner. Our allocations, our schedule, and our regulations are going back to normal to mirror our pre-pandemic program. Right here is just to give you a taste of what we mean by normal. This and all presentations will be made available on our website if you would like to take a deeper dive. And for more information, please attend our annual trout stocking meeting held virtually on March 4th. With that, I would like to leave you with the opportunity to ask me anything you would like. We will entertain a few questions here before moving on to the rest of the program. You can also shoot me an email at sean.kraus@dep.nj.gov. As mentioned, we're real proud of the work we do and what we accomplish for the anglers in New Jersey. Please use this meeting as an opportunity not only to tell us what we do well, but to also let us know what we can work on. Thanks a lot, and I hope we have a great meeting.
So one thing I do want to mention before I do move on is that here's an update that the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission has modified the recreational possession of American shad and has reduced it from 3 to 2 in the Delaware River. And this is to address unsustainable adult female mortality in the Delaware Basin. So once this gets signed off by our DEP commissioner, it will go into effect. So the creel limit for American shad will be reduced from 3 to 2. Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd like to introduce the next speaker. It's Craig Lemon. As we get moving forward here, we have a nice little video overview of the Hackettstown Hatchery for you. And then Craig is going to give a pre-recorded video presentation, possibly another surprise mixed in there. And then Craig and Tyler will be available to answer questions related to the Hackettstown Hatchery warm and cool water fish stocking program.
The title of this presentation is Cool and Warm Water Fish Culture and Production at the Hackettstown State Fish Hatchery. As you can see on this first slide, the hatcheries, we're currently in our 111th year of fish culture. And this is just a couple postcards of what the hatchery looked like back in the days. The island pools and the snake pits, and the next slide, back in the day, how we transported mostly trout around the state of New Jersey. Those galvanized tanks full of water, scoop the fish up, add some ice blocks, and there you go. They took off, and hope you got them there safely. This is how we do it. Currently we've got a pretty new fleet of vehicles. We've got high pressure oxygen on all the tanks, so we can pack the fish in pretty tight. We've got a boat, and we do a lot of float stocking. One of the highlights of the 22 to 2022 season was the weighing in of a new state record hybrid striped bass that was caught by John Veda in Monksville Reservoir, 16 pounds, 10 ounces in October. Him and a few of his buddies were out trolling, practicing for a walleye tournament in New York State, and they hooked into this thing and got it landed. The crazy thing is that it came from a stocking of only 5 fish, which a lot of people questioned why. We had netted a pond in the hatchery and stocked 50 of these 20-inch fish in Split Rock Reservoir the day before. We had planned on going back to that pond the next day and hopefully catch another 50. We only caught 5 that day, so we ended up stocking the 5 fish in Monksville Reservoir. And here we go. This one of the 5 turned into a new state record. What we're doing currently right now is we're out on Bud Lake trap netting for northern pike broodstock. Typically we set the nets around March 10th. The earliest we'd ever had set them was February 26th in 2018. But as we all know, January and February this year have been untypically warm, and we ended up setting the nets on 2/13, which is 13 days earlier than we ever have. So far we've brought in a few fish, and last year we only brought in 32 pike from Bud Lake, which was the lowest number since 2015. Our 20-year average for catching at Bud Lake is about 125 fish, so we were down pretty dramatically last year. Don't really have a great reason for it, but we were in the lake 11 days netting, so we're kind of hoping that it snaps back this year. We all remember, March of 2020, the COVID pandemic hit in New York City and New Jersey. We had just finished trap netting northern pike in Bud Lake. We were getting ready to go set trap nets in Swartzwood Lake for walleyes. We were told, that we had to do the distancing thing, and that we weren't allowed to put in, many people in a boat. So we were told not to do it. So we made a quick phone call to the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, Linesville Hatchery out in Western PA, where COVID hadn't hit yet, and they were doing walleye eggs and muskie eggs. So we asked them if they'd be willing to take some extra eggs for us, and in trade we would give them northern pike fingerlings and channel cat eggs. And it worked out great that first year. We met at the water gap, right at the bridge there, and 2 trucks parked side by side, and we exchanged eggs there and fish, and it worked well. It worked so well that for both states that we decided, like the last 2 years, 2021 and 22, to let's continue this trade. And it was made a little bit less work for both hatcheries. And this year, there's been a lot of changes in the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission's hatcheries on the superintendent, the supervisory levels. So I think we're gonna try to go back to our own walleye collection, egg collection up at Swartzwood, and potentially our own muskie egg collection, just as a backup. We'll have Pennsylvania eggs to back us up, but I think it's about time we get back to it. This is our typical spring at the hatchery. Most of our ponds are empty currently. We like to let the ponds stay empty for the weeds to die off and the ground to stiffen up. So staff is out filling ponds right now. There's about 65 ponds on site, so it'll take a couple months. Once the ponds are full, depending on what's going to be put in there, species and size, A bunch of ponds at this time of year will be getting tiny fry, like 3 to 5 day old fry. So staff will be out fertilizing the ponds with pulverized alfalfa meal and liquid nitan. In the top left picture, you can see both going on. We're spraying liquid nitan and pulverized alfalfa mixed with water. And there's a boat with pulverized alfalfa meal in bags just going around the pond doing a big stir. And we're trying to create plankton and zooplankton for these tiny fry to feed on. Most of those fry need to feed for about 40 to 50 days, then they reach about 1.5 inches. And then it's time they either start cannibalizing or we bring them into the hatchery building and start them on dry food, depending on the species. That's one fun thing about the Pakistan hatchery is we raise 15 different species and they're all raised differently. So it's kind of an exciting, we kind of fly, we fly by night a little bit more than we probably want to, but Mother Nature has a lot of control of what we're doing. And so we do that for largemouth and smallmouth, hybrid stripers, walleyes are all tiny fry. In the bottom right picture, we're taking a plankton tow. We throw a fine net out into the pond, drag it in to a small container in the bottom of the net, pour it into a glass jar, bring it into the hatchery building, look at it under a microscope and to see what sort of plankton we have, identify it and quantify it, how many small little daphnias and copepods and things for the walleyes and those other fish to eat. Yes, there's not a lot of food, we would go right back to fertilizing, monitoring DOs and keeping an eye on things. These are some of the numbers that we stocked last year. We had a good year on these sausage, the northern pike tigers and muskies. We made all our numbers that the regional biologists had requested. Then we go into the walleyes. Like I said, we may get back into our own walleye collection for brood stock. Top left photo is the 2-day-old fry. They're super microscopic there. We put them, typically we put about 500,000 into a hatchery pond, about a 4-acre pond, fertilize it, let it go for about 45 days, and we get our 1.8-inch fingerlings. And last year we stocked 95,000, which was the number requested. We ended up with almost 200,000 surplus that we spread from the Route 84 bridge in Matamoros, Westfall, all the way down to Phillipsburg. And we actually had some extra 4-inch fingerlings, which are minnow finished 1.8s, and they actually went into the Delaware in that same section. This is another one of our typical hatchery days in the summer, from June, early June, right through mid-July. That's the pond top left is our largest hatchery pond. It's a 5-acre pond. We stocked that early in the season, maybe April 1st, with 250 pounds of fathead minnows, which are generously purchased by Muskies Inc. Chapter 22. And we stock them in 2 large ponds. We feed the ponds every day in a couple spots. And once we start noticing baby fry, then you'll see the crew on the top left photo. Kind of resembles a deer drive. You got 4, 5, 6 people splashing their way in towards the net, towards the feed pile, with 2 employees with a 40-foot seine. You're going to catch them up. Then we put them in 5-gallon buckets. On a good day, we'll capture 10 to 25-gallon buckets. We put them in the tank truck on the bottom right-hand side, and then we go to these walleye or bass ponds, and we lift the bed up and blow them in. And as the season progresses, the water temperatures warm up. We set up 100 adult largemouth bass in 3 ponds. That's usually around mid-April. Come around the Memorial Day weekend, staff start looking around the pond banks to see if the small largemouth fry have come off their nests. If so, the middle picture there, you can see the crew out with the bass fry nets, super fine mesh, 12-foot long. They corral these up, and we load them into bottom right-hand photos. We load them into 5-gallon buckets, and then we transport them to separate ponds away from the adults that have no fish in them. They've been pre-fertilized with so we've got plankton growing, and then we grow them to about 2 inches. In the past 3 years, we've stocked 317,000 of these fish, about 100,000 per year. So we've had some really nice years. About around the same time, we do smallmouth bass. We set up 60 adult smallies, kind of the same thing in a couple ponds, and we keep an eye out on the nests when they swim off. you'll see in the right-hand corner there, that's probably 3,000 to 5,000 baby smallmouths. We transport them into a separate pond, fertilized it, grow them, and we stocked about 9,000 2-inch fish in Union Lake. Then we jump right in as the water temperature is warm. We get into hybrid straight bass. They like 80-degree water, which typically pushes you into June. We get our fry from Delmarva Aquatics in Delaware, and we put them in a pond for 45 days, fertilized. Unlike any other species that we raise here, those fish we harvest at about 1.5 inches out of the pond, and we bring them into the building, and they're easily converted to a dry food pellet, which we can't really say for any other species. So they readily convert and they readily grow. Kind of one of our favorite species to grow here, because you kind of throw as much feed as you can throw in the tank, they eat it, and they grow to about 4 to 5 inches. Last year we had an off year. We typically stock about 50,000 of these fish, and we're once again we put these tiny fry in the pond, and you don't really know. You monitor oxygen levels and other levels, but not really sure what happened there. Why we came up a little short. We suspect that we had maybe a little issue with the fry transportation or handling the fry coming from Delaware. Bounce into another warm water species, the channel catfish broodstock. They love to spawn when the water temps hit 80, which is typically around June 8th. We had 200 adult fish in pond 90, which is one of our biggest, lowest in the hatchery ponds. We had 50 of these plastic drums like you see in the top left-hand corner. They're 30-gallon plastic. We put a little rectangular hole, and then the broodstock get paired up, and they go in the hole, and they do their business. And then twice a week, the hatchery staff put on waders. They sneak out to the barrels, peek in. If there's catfish in there, they kind of boot them out a little bit. Sometimes that's a little fun. They come splashing out of there, and these fish are 10 to 15 pounds, so they make quite a ruckus. And then if the eggs are there, then we grab them out, and they're 3 to 5 pound masses. You can see in the top right-hand photo the different colors of the masses. From right to left, you've got like a 1-day-old gold mass. The middle mass there is like a dark gold. That's like a 3-day-old mass. And then the mass on the left is that orange one. That's like a 5 to 6 day old mass, and that's just going to hatch. They hatch around 6 days in 80-degree water, whereas trout hatch in 38 days in 50-degree water. So that hot water really makes those eggs develop fast. And you can see all the jars in the bottom right are all different colors. That front jar on the right, that jar is probably going to hatch it overnight that same night. You can see the fish moving around inside the eggs. And these are the size of the channel cats we stock every year. 6 to 7 inch fish go in large reservoirs, 14-inch fish go in 45 smaller water bodies, and then the 22s go in only 20 water bodies. But these programs have been really working great over the last 5 to 10 years. We're seeing a lot of results, a lot of fish being caught. And we come into our only cold water species, the landlocked salmon. We trade northern pike fingerlings with the state of Massachusetts. It's Roger Reed Salmon Hatchery. We hold those fish from, I think we get the trade fish around September every year, and we overwinter them. And we normally stock them around October 15th the following year, when lake and reservoir water temperatures drop down to, in that 58-degree area, and we can stock them out. They're usually, by then, they're 14 to 16 inches long. They go in Aeroflex, Merrill Creek, Tilcon, and Way Onda. And as you remember, last year we had the new state record broke in Merrill Creek. Something we'll be doing just about the same time as the meeting's going on here is fin clipping the salmon. It's a marking method that the Fisheries lab in Lebanon will be going out and starting to sample these fish. And hopefully by then we'll have 3 to 5 years worth of clips on, clipping a different fin every year. And they'll be able to look at the fish and say, oh, that's a adipose fin clip that was stocked in 2022. And they'll do measurements and weights, and they can get some ideas on relative growth. It'll be some interesting. And if by chance there's no clip, maybe there's natural reproduction. Just a question. Round Valley Reservoir, we work with RVTA. They buy 500,000 shiner fry. And from Arkansas, we put them in one of our hatchery ponds. We fertilize it and feed them. We try to get them up to 2 to 3 inches, which is usually late summer. Last year, the fish came and they probably weigh like 2 pounds. And when we stocked them, they were 409 pounds. So just trying to bolster the forage base in Round Valley. Another interesting program is the State Mosquito Commission has enlisted us to raise fathead minnows and gambusia to help control mosquito larvae around the state. And we supply the county mosquito commissions. They make requests to the state commission, for whatever 50,000 fish. They'll show up here at the hatchery. We put a tank in their truck. We fill it up with 50,000 fish, and then they go around their counties and stock them. The gambusia are typically only supposed to go in, like abandoned swimming pools. In the case on the right, maybe a lagoon at a dump down in Cumberland County. CBTM projects have been a great use for the hatchery. It's corporate business tax maintenance projects. It's a good way. The money doesn't come out of our budget, the hatchery budget. It comes out of the state budget, the corporate business tax money. And so it helps us. This pond here we filled last spring, looked at it 3 days later and it was empty. Thank goodness we didn't put any fish in it. The hatchery's 111 years old. So the bottom of the concrete had rotted out unbeknownst to us. And the water blew out. It was only full for 3 days. The water blew out. We got the CBTM project. We took all the dirt out, did a bunch of concrete work, put some fresh soil back in there, rented a compactor. And now the pond's been full for a month and a half, holding water, and we'll probably use it this spring. Another CBTM project. This is the biggest pond in the hatchery. It's the 5-acre where staff was out netting minnows earlier. In one of the earlier slides, it was getting muddy. The banks were getting eroded real bad from geese and wind. So we got a project, and we had a private company came in and did a bunch of dredging. A couple hundred dump truck loads of soil came out. Then we rented a compactor on the excavator, packed the banks down, which is the first time we've ever done that. We seem to have enjoyed that. We put a bunch of riprap down, did some bank stabilization, and used it all last season, and it did a great job. One of the really exciting things last year, it was about this time last year, we got CBT money, corporate business tax, for $32,000. This hatchery, the intensive hatchery building, was built in 1999, so we had that original alarm still here. We put a brand new alarm system in. Back in the day before this alarm, we would get a phone call whenever, 4 o'clock in the morning, from the alarm company saying that there was a problem at the hatchery, but we really couldn't identify it. This now, we have the ability to monitor, like it doesn't matter if there's an alarm or not. You can go on your cell phone and monitor how many gallons a minute you're pumping, what the water temperatures are in all 3 systems. In the case of an emergency and a pump went down, we actually have the ability on our phones now to turn another pump on. Each recirc system has 2 pumps, so we can turn a backup pump on and save the day. So we're really enjoying this option. Something that's ongoing as we're having this meeting is it was supposed to be done last year. The price came in a little high. They rebid it. We've got a 5-6 bay storage garage up back that's 60 years old. The doors won't open and close. So there's a demolition project going on and a rebuild. We've been fortunate enough to acquire quite a bit of equipment between boats and tractors, trailers and stuff, and we really don't have much storage. So we got permission, from CBT money to build a brand new storage building, which should be done here by the summer. This is some of our current issues that we're trying to deal with. We're trying to figure out ways to get around this problem. Right now, as we speak, the ice is all off. If there was no ice this year, ice is off, and we've got flocks of these common mergansers, not just here at the hatchery, but all the rivers and all the lakes around the state. And particularly in the hatchery where the fish are small and the densities are so high, if you get a flock of 50 of these birds in here, they can eat a lot. As you can see, that the bottom left picture is a male merg eating a 10-inch largemouth bass. And that bird ate. I sat and watched that bird eat that fish. Top right pan photo is a female merg eating like a 4-inch channel cat. So yes, we have 65 earthen ponds, which seems great. It seems like, you could raise 1 million fish, but if you can't raise small fish outside over the winter, then then that kind of defeats the purpose of having all that space. This year, we're making an attempt. We've kept 5,000 3-inch largemouth bass in the building, and we've cut the feed down, and we've got them in 52-degree spring water, and they seem to be doing really good. Plan is to hold them in the building here for another few weeks till the mergansers migrate and put them out in the ponds, and hope that's going to work. And we hope to do that with the channel cats in the near future also. Big thanks to the sport fish restoration money. If you read through it, it's revenue comes from manufacturers' excise taxes on sport fishing equipment, import duties on fishing tackle and pleasure boats, and the portion of the gasoline tax attributable to small engines and motorboats. Every state gets a chunk of this money, and it has a lot to do with the size of the land and water area of your state and the number of paid hunters and fishermen in your state. These dollars typically fund about 75% of the project cost, with the state matching the other 25%. It's a big help to both hatcheries for sure. And the last slide here is, something that I'm particularly proud of. The hatchery is we've created this little social media post called Go Fish Friday, and it's highlights hatchery, hatchery programs, bureau programs, and it highlights angler catches. So, we want to thank all the anglers for sharing the pictures and stories with us, and all the comments you posted. Some are good or some are bad. We do our best to answer as many as we can on the social media. This thing's been running for about 94 weeks straight. We're going to be coming up on 100 posts here, which is pretty cool. And like I said, we appreciate it, all your feedback. And that's about the end of it. Hopefully we have some questions, and thanks a lot, and have a good spring. Tight lines, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Craig. That was really great. Shows all the hard work that's done there at the Hackettstown Hatchery on behalf of the anglers in New Jersey, and I'm sure they appreciate it. Right now, I'd like to ask you if you have any questions for Craig or Tyler on fish production. Please raise your hand in the menu there. As you're raising your hands, I'm going to launch a poll question for you. I'm going to give you a little bit of background real quick. The limitation on the software here only allows us to provide 5 answers at a time. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you one question at a time. You're going to answer. And this first question here, let me just launch it. What species are you most interested in hearing about at future meetings? Largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, panfish, catfish, walleye. So go ahead and vote on this. There'll be a second follow-up question with other species on it. Go ahead and vote for that. And then we're going to do like a little playoff where we'll take the top 2 percentages of this question, the top 2 species on the next question, and then we'll combine them in a top 4, and then you can vote for that. So as of right now, it looks like we have 60% of the people voting. These numbers are coming in live changing. Largemouth bass is out to an early lead with 47%. And at the bottom of the list are panfish and catfish at 6% each. So let's keep some votes coming in. We're up to 70% of the participants voting, 72, 73%. Right now, largemouth is still in a lead at 46%. It's a tight race for second with smallmouth at 22 and walleye at 20. We're up to 74%. I'll close it once we hit 75. All right, does not look like we're going to get to 75. We'll close the poll with largemouth. There it is. Largemouth bass at 44, smallmouth at 22. All right, close the poll. The next one is launched. Which species are you most interested in hearing about at future meetings? We have muskie, northern pike, hybrid striped bass, trout, and other. 28% of the vote is in. Now it's up to 30, up to 35, 42, 43. Trout's out to an early lead at 41%. We have other in there, which is only at 2%. With 69% of the vote in, we're at trout leading at 43%. Northern pike and hybrids are tied at 20. Muskie is at 16. Good thing we have our own trout meeting coming up next week. 75% of the vote is in. So I will close that with trout at 43. Hybrid stripers, let's see, close it here. Hybrid stripers at 21. And northern pike at 19. going to change something on the fly real quick. Karen, if you can, she's going to adjust the next poll question. We'll have largemouth, smallmouth. Let's go with hybrid stripers and northern pike. We are going to continue to hold an independent trout meeting. So let's look at, once again, largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, hybrid stripers, and northern pike. We'll skip trout on that final question. And Karen, if you could work on that while we look at any hands. Scott, can you let me know if there's any hands raised for questions for Tyler or Craig?
Or we have a hand raised by Stephen. Stephen, would you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, hear you good.
Yeah, I just want to thank them for all the hard work that they do for raising the shiners for us from Round Valley Trout Association. That's all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen. And I have another hand raised. Luke, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh,
hello. Thank
there
you.
you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wasn't sure if this was the right question to ask for this, but I did notice on the presentation about raising golden shiners and those mosquito fish as well. I know recently, maybe the past year or two, some tackle shops and bait tackle shops have been struggling to get just bait in general, like shiners. Just wondering if maybe there's an opportunity there to help out those local bait shops to get some shiners themselves. I'm not sure about the surplus myself, really. I've just been hearing about it. Maybe it's a good question. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that question. I mean, currently we're not set up to sell fish to the public in that manner. If they're, for bait fishing and stuff like that for profit. On the flip side, if there's any local bait fish populations in ponds or lakes that need some bolstering, we can always supplement there. But no, at this point in time, we don't give away or sell bait to tackle shops for profit. If anybody else would like to add from our staff, please jump in. Okay, Scott, do we have any other questions with hands raised?
No more hand raised. Oh, just two more just went up. All right, we got Frank Ross.
Hi, this is Frank. I have a quick question, Tyler, about private stocking. I live in Medford, great largemouth bass fishing lakes. And 2 years ago, my homeowner association stocked our lake, which is about an 8 to 10 acre lake with about 100 small largemouth bass. And they also stocked it with about 10,000 minnows. My question is, since that time, I have yet to been able to catch, maybe it's me, but I have not caught any of the native largemouth bass. I continually to catch these smaller 12-inch bass that they stocked, and I can identify them fairly easily from the native bass. I mean, do you think that was a good stocking practice that was exhibited there, or is it just for a small lake, the amount of minnows and bass? What's your feeling about that?
That's probably more of a biologist question. At the hatchery, we just raise the fish. The
Right.
regional fisheries biologist that Sean put up in his slide earlier could probably answer that better than we could.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was going to pass that one to Chris Smith. If you could answer that question, that'd be great.
Great.
Sure, yeah, I can address it. I think we probably need a little additional information to what the fishery kind of was like before, that stocking was done. A more encompassing, either a seining survey, an electrofishing survey to give us a little bit better numbers. 100 fish per acre. Could you repeat again? How big were the fish that were stocked?
They looked to be about like 10 to 14 inches, the largemouth that was stocked.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a bad number of fish for a water body that size. Typically we use, somewhere about 25 per acre, for advanced size fish of that nature. It should have produced some good results. Now, what year were they stocked?
I think about 2 years ago.
Okay, I give it a little more time. You need a few years. You need a few years on those fish to mature before you're going to get some natural spawning to occur. I think it's going to take, it's going to take a few years before you really see like some drastic results.
Okay, well, just a follow-up. Do the minnows, the 10,000 minnows, will they reproduce on their own, Nickel, in the lake?
They were fathead minnows?
I'm not sure.
Probably. Most likely not. They probably were consumed within the first year.
Okay, my issue isn't catching the stock bass and waiting for them to mature. I know for a fact that there are 4, 5, 6 pound largemouth bass in that lake prior to the stocking, but yet I'm not able to see any of the native bass that were in the lake prior to the stocking. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's really kind of hard to tell. I mean, most of the fish, they will kind of, if you're kind of going based on, coloration of the fish, they all should, look very similar after a time of being in the lake.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, thank you for that. At this point, let me launch the follow-up poll question. And if anybody does have an additional question for Hatchery staff, please continue to keep your hand up. Eric, I will be checking in with you to see if there's any relevant questions in the question box. But for now, let's launch this poll. So here's your final 4, excluding trout. Between the top 4 answers, which species are you most interested in hearing about at future meetings? Largemouth, smallmouth, northern pike, and hybrids. Right now, largemouth is up to an early lead, 39%. Northern pike is low man on the totem pole at 15%, with 70% of the votes in, 74% in. This is a pretty tight race for second. 76% is in, 78%. And we'll go ahead and close that poll with 78% in, largemouth bass at 40%, smallmouth bass in second place at 24%, hybrid stripers in third at 20%, and northern pike at 16%. All right, going back to Scott, do you see any hands raised?
We'll come back to Janet in just a second. We'll let's try Charles Sadowski.
Yes, I'm a Sussex County resident. I fish Lake Arrowflex, and Tilcon Lake is also in the area. And Lake Arrowflex is very restrictive as far as shore fishing. I didn't know if you had any plans to increase that availability in the shore areas, Lake Arrowflex. And Tilcon Lake is very inaccessible for rowboats and fishing from a boat for that lake, and just wondered if there was any plans on increasing that accessibility for boats in Tilcon Lake as well.
I will toss that one up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is Ross Schramko, biologist for that region. Both of those water bodies are owned by Parks and Forestry. So I'll have to have meetings with them saying that, we're getting interest, more and more interest from anglers looking for increased accessibility. So I'll have a conversation with them and we'll see what we can do about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for jumping in, Ross. Let's go back to Janet one more time, see if we can get your question. Might be something wrong with your mic. It does say you're unmuted, but for the sake of time, Sean, do you want to move on?
Sure. Let's do that to stay on schedule. I do want to say if anybody's having technical difficulties getting their verbal question out, maybe if you could type that into the question box, then we'll circle back on it a little bit later. Moving along to the next presenter is Chris Smith. You heard from him a little bit earlier. He's a regional biologist for the lower Delaware River drainage. He's done a lot of work with warm water fisheries. He's our invasive species lead. And Karen, if you could play that pre-recorded video for Chris's presentation, that would be great.
Good morning. My name is Chris Smith. I'm a principal fisheries biologist with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife Bureau of Freshwater Fisheries. I currently serve as our lead black bass biologist and invasive species coordinator for the agency. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I'm super excited to see the continued support and participation from so many of our constituents. So this morning we're going to go over some black bass and invasive species management updates. So 2022 was an exciting year. Our fisheries biologists were finally able to get back out into the field after dealing with 2 years of COVID restrictions. We had a fairly good year, completing 20 surveys at 19 locations statewide, some of which were targeted surveys, others we consider to be general surveys. A targeted survey is one where only bass, and specifically bass, were collected during the survey. A general survey, we might collect bass and invasive species, or maybe bass and northern pike. So as we go through and highlight some of these surveys completed, any follow-up questions can be directed to the regional fisheries biologist. Here I've placed a map showing the different regions in the state. We have 6 regional biologists, 6 regions. So any further questions, feel free to reach out to your regional fisheries biologist. The first water body I'd like to highlight is Mercer Lake. Mercer Lake is a 275-acre impoundment of Assunpink Creek located in Mercer County Park. The lake was last sampled in 2016, at which time 63 bass were collected. This resulted in a catch rate of 42 bass per hour, and when compared to other water bodies in the region and throughout the state, this is an excellent catch rate and above average. The most recent survey in fall of 2022 resulted in 85 bass collected and a catch rate of 51 bass per hour, so slightly higher than 2016. 85% of the fish collected were greater than 12 inches. 65% of those fish collected were greater than 15 inches, with a few largest bass being just over 5 pounds. The bass fishery looks excellent at Mercer Lake right now. Should continue to provide exceptional fishing opportunities for anglers in the near future. And this is a really nice complement to go along with our quality muskie fishery that exists. So the next water body is Amwell Lake. Amwell Lake is located in East Amwell Township, Hunterdon County. It is a wildlife management area. This survey was completed in the fall of 2022 by Scott Collenberg, one of our other biologists. The catch rate for largemouth bass was determined to be 18 bass per hour, which would be on the low to moderate side. Channel catfish were found to be very abundant, with most of them in the range of 16 to 20 inches. And that population should probably be reevaluated in either 2023, 2024 to determine if any stocking numbers should be adjusted, and we might have some stunning of the population. Noteworthy was a bowfin that was also collected during the survey. This lake is part of our annual trout stocking as well as the channel catfish stocking program. Next up is Rainbow Lake, located in Salem County, just downstream of Parvin State Park. This is a wildlife management area and annually one of the most popular tournament locations in southern New Jersey. We last sampled it in 2016, stocked it with some supplemental young of the year largemouth bass in 2017. This survey completed in the fall of 22 resulted in 98 total bass being collected and a catch rate of 77 bass per hour. This is a very high catch rate, especially for this region. So we would have some concerns of, population distribution, of whether there's too many fish, whether we have some stunning going on. So things actually look very good. 69% of the bass were greater than 12 inches. 21% of the bass were greater than 15 inches, which would be really good numbers. Indicates a nice balance of, numbers and size of fish. The 2 largest bass collected were 5.18 and 6.08 pounds. So things look good for Rainbow Lake. No additional stocking at this point, and we'll take a look at it again in a couple of years to see how things are doing. Next we have Assunpink Lake. Assunpink Lake is located in Monmouth County. It's 227 acres. This is the largest of the impoundments on the Assunpink Wildlife Management Area. For years, the most popular tournament location as part of our wildlife management area permitting process. It is a lunker bass lake. It carries a 3-fish creel limit, 15-inch size limit, And in recent years, we started having some habitat issues, mainly from invasive plant species. First it was water chestnuts, and more recently, hydrilla has kind of taken over a large percentage of the lake, especially during midsummer, when coverage reaches, nearly 75% of the surface area is covered by a hydrilla. So we started treating the water body this year for hydrilla in midsummer. So we wanted to kind of get some baseline data as the treatments were starting. So we completed our first bass survey outside of our standardized time, which we typically do most of our bass sampling in the spring and in the fall. So we did one in August 9th, and then we did another one in October 24th this year. So we did 2 surveys this year, and both of them had pretty low catch rates. The first survey collected 27 bass in the summer, and we had a catch rate of 23 bass per hour. And in the fall, we electrofished for nearly 2 hours to collect 38 bass and had a catch rate of only 18 bass per hour. So we want to see, what the catch rate looks like in the spring. We're going to do a survey this spring of 2023, and hopefully we can report back those results here next year at this time. So it's 720 acres. Manasquan Reservoir is one of the largest water bodies in the state open to public angling. The property is maintained and managed by Water Supply Authority and Monmouth County Park System. During the fall 2022 survey completed by Eric Boehm, our biologist, he found a total of 59 largemouth bass and 11 smallmouth bass, resulted in a catch rate of 28 bass per hour for largemouth, 5 bass per hour for smallmouth. Combined, you're looking at a 33 bass per hour catch rate, which would be good, moderate abundance. Given the conditions on hand of an active hab being present, the vegetation, the hydrilla, which is being treated, was in the process of dying. Might have had the fish redistributed a little bit. So we do plan on doing another survey in the spring of 2023 to get a little bit better assessment, and I think these numbers will be even higher. But things look excellent for the bass population. We continue to do some supplemental stocking of smallmouth bass when available. Things look bright for that lake, in the bass population. Next up is Bud Lake. Bud Lake is located in Morris County. It's 376 acres, and it's probably best known for its pike fishery. We annually stock northern pike in this location. Ideal habitat for northern pike. Very shallow, high abundance of aquatic vegetation. Great for northern pike and chain pickerel. Bass population is also rather good. During the survey, we found that on the lower moderate side abundance, 16 bass per hour. One thing of special note, our agency is partnering with the Raritan Headwaters, Rutgers, and Mount Olive Township for the implementation of a stormwater and watershed management plan to address nutrient input in the lake. The lake has been susceptible to fish kills in the past, particularly during the winter. So hopefully some of these management plans will help to address and alleviate some of those any future fish kills. The DoD Lake has been one of the most popular WMA water bodies in southern New Jersey since the early 2000s. It's a frequent location for tournaments and recreational anglers. The unique habitat is ideal for largemouth bass, and in more recent years, the northern snakehead. Due to the close proximity with the Delaware River and a pipe that leads directly out to the river, the snakeheads have made their way into the pond and taken up, well-established residence. So we go out every summer, or almost every summer, to now monitor not only the largemouth bass population, but also the snakehead population. So we would consider this a non-standardized bass survey, because we're doing it during the summer and not during the spring and in the fall. During the survey, we collected 75 bass in an hour. So, we don't typically look at catch rates during the non-standardized period, but you'd have a catch rate of about 75 bass per hour, the largest of which was 4.5 pounds. We did collect 10 adult snakeheads during the survey. So anytime we do a electrofishing survey on the lower Delaware River tidal section or any of the tributary creeks, we're looking at invasive species and largemouth bass. In this case, this survey was done on Woodbury Creek, where we did a 1-hour electrofishing survey during the day at low tide, and which is when we have our higher catch rate. And we collected 42 bass, and the largest was just over 17 inches and weighed just over 3 pounds. During the survey, we also collected 2 snakeheads, and kind of surprisingly was 1 freshwater drum was collected. This was the second freshwater drum collected in the summer of 2022, which we'll talk a little bit more about that, later on. So those are just a few of the highlights, a few of the water bodies that we went to this year. I'm just going to kind of go over just briefly. Last year, I had a little more detailed information regarding our wildlife management area, tournament permits, and the permitting process. But for those of you who might have missed last year, I just want to go over some of the information because this is a good way that we annually use this information to supplement any of our data that we collected. So if we did a survey, say, on Rainbow Lake this year, and we have certain results, we can compare those results to what anglers are catching and kind of see if the information jives, to see if it matches up, and determine whether any additional sampling, stocking is necessary. So we'll just briefly go over the WMA permit process. So permits are required to hold tournaments on all WMA water bodies or boat ramp locations. The permitting process began in 1994. And it requires for any organized fishing event which has more than 5 boats or more than 10 people. Currently, there's no fee to obtain a permit, and applications are accepted on January 1st of each year. So permits are required at all wildlife management areas. You can see the list, pictured, anywhere from Assunpink Lake to Delaware Lake, DOD Lake, Pemberton Lake, Rainbow Lake, Salem Canal, Split Rock Reservoir, Union Lake, just to name a few. Any wildlife management area requires a tournament permit. So there's 2 parts to the permitting process. There's an application and a report form. Application gets filled out for where you would like and when you would like to hold your tournament. After the tournament is held, a report form gets submitted back to our agency within 2 weeks that has all the information on what was caught during the event. So the benefits of permitting and reporting are reduced conflicts between anglers and fishing clubs, allows Fish and Wildlife to actively monitor bass populations without sampling, supplements any existing sampling data. We can collect additional information on invasive species distribution, and it helps to guide future management activities. So in this table, we see the total number of applications that were received from 2017 to 2022. So the last 6 years, we received 999 applications for tournaments. From that, we received 471 report forms back, and it gave us a return rate of 47%. Now, the return rate is widely variable. Our lowest rate was 32% in 2018 and 75% in 2019. And the last 2 years, in 21-22, we've been pretty consistently low at 43% and 41%. So the one thing that we're going to try to do this year, and we are going to do, is send out emails the Monday or Tuesday after the weekend that a tournament, an event is held, to kind of just give the organizers a little reminder about the reporting requirement. Just a few highlights from this year. The largest bass that was caught was at Shepherd's Mill Pond, Cumberland County, at 7.09 pounds. Here you can see that fish pictured. There was only 9 bass greater than 5 pounds reported, which is surprisingly low. So we're going to take a look at some of these water bodies and kind of do some sampling to see if the catch rate is actually really indicative of the fish population. The heaviest 5-fish limit of the year came from Union Lake on July 2nd, which was 16.69 pounds. And as I mentioned before about the value of the tournament reports is that we can look at the distribution and abundance of invasive species populations. 67 snakeheads were reported that were caught by bass anglers, during tournaments this year. So this is the same information that we just saw in the previous table, but in a little bit different graph of the number of tournament applications that we received from 2017 to 2022 by water body. So it kind of eliminated any water bodies that have had less than 20 total applications in the last 6 years, and this is just the ones that have greater than 20. So this is our more popular water body. So what we can do is we can look at the trend in the number of applications per year. So we would suspect that as the number of applications increases, from year to year, that would be a water body that the fishery is getting better. So we can go and kind of go back to our electrofishing, data and kind of almost, cross-reference it per se to kind of check this. So places like over here on the left-hand side, Lake Audrey, significant increase since last year. I think we went from 2 tournaments in 2021 to 18 tournaments in 2022. On the same token, over on the right-hand side, we have the Salem Canal, which has had a, not a significant, but a slight decrease in the number of tournaments that are being held. So something to look at. Places like Stone Tavern also have had a nice increase, over the last few years too. So, and we know that that fishery has been getting better in the last couple of years. So just good, good information, something to look at. Here's another one of those long-term trends that we look at, and that's the percentage of smallmouth bass in relation to the total catch. Right this past year in 2022, we were under 5% of the total catch. This number has been going down since 2011 when we hit our peak. And as I've previously described at other forums, this was most likely due to the largemouth bass virus that worked its way through Union Lake back in the early 2000s, and eventually we had a reshifting from smallmouth dominated to largemouth dominated, and that's where we see the shift in percentages being more of a largemouth dominated fishery. So we can continue to monitor the bass population there through our electrofishing and through these tournament results, and provide the best management recommendations. Here's another one of those long-term trends, looking at the number of 5-pound bass at Assunpink Lake. From 1999 to 2022, you can see in the late 90s, early 2000s is when the lake probably had one of its, best peaks for big fish, and that also has been, steadily declining over the, last number of years due to loss of habitat and the presence of invasive aquatic plant species in the name of, water chestnuts and hydrilla have had the biggest impact, on top of extreme siltation in the headwaters of the pond. So looking ahead, we're going to continue to collect tournament data, revise our tournament report forms, better communication with the tournament organizers to get those report forms back. Continue to collect additional fisheries information like invasive species information. And then ultimately, we're still talking about getting a kind of a bigger comprehensive document, kind of showing a long-term, tournament history type report, down the road still. So the last topic that we're going to cover is invasive species, or as we call it, potentially dangerous species. So a New Jersey statute prohibits the possession or release of live potentially dangerous animals, including fish. Dangerous species are defined as a species that is non-native to an ecosystem and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. So we have 13 species that we've included in this potentially dangerous species list. This includes the Asian swamp eel, the bighead carp, The grass and silver carp, blue and flathead catfish, round goby, brook stickleback, green sunfish, oriental weatherfish, snakehead, and warmouth. In addition to these, we have all black bass except for largemouth and smallmouth bass are also considered potentially dangerous. And this is specifically to target the Alabama bass, which was introduced into Virginia and has been making its way further north and is known to hybridize with our largemouth and smallmouth bass. So we've included those on the list too. So New Jersey Fish and Wildlife has been actively monitoring and sampling for and removing, in some cases, invasive fish species since 2008. You can see us here out on the Delaware River, just under the Trenton Makes Bridge, looking for flathead catfish in 2022. Much of our invasive species sampling since 2008 has focused on three main species: the flathead catfish, the Asian swamp eel, and the northern snakehead. But as more and more non-native invasive species become established, the need for sampling is going to increase. I mentioned earlier during a survey at Woodbury Creek, tributary of the lower Delaware River, we did collect a freshwater drum. This happened to be the first, specimen that we collected in 2022. Our agencies across the river, the PA Fish and Boat Commission, the Academy of Natural Science, also caught these, fish, the freshwater drum in 2022. So this is a species that's new. It's established in the Delaware River, and we currently do not have any regulation on the species. So situations like this, where we have a new documentation of introduced invasive species, is a prime example of why our agency's participation in the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force is extremely important. So currently, New Jersey has 3 representatives on the Mid-Atlantic Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species, otherwise known as MAPIS. Myself, Heather Desko from the New Jersey Water Supply Authority, Dr. Julie Lockwood from Rutgers University are the 3 current representatives. The panel meets twice per year. The panel assists in the coordination of AIS management, policy, education, and outreach initiatives at a regional level. They also assist in providing funds for AIS research, education and outreach, innovative management projects, and state AIS plan development. So in 2022, New Jersey received $20,000 in funding from MAPIS for the development of an AIS management plan, which is very exciting. So this map shows the current status of which states have plans, which do not. New Jersey is one of 5 states that do not have an approved AIS plan. 3 states are in the works, and we can officially say that we can change our color on this map to blue because we're about a month in on working on getting an approved AIS plan in New Jersey. Aquatic invasive species can include any aquatic organism, including fish, crustaceans, mollusks, aquatic plants, pathogens. Currently, we're looking at over 100 species that will be included in the future management plan. The Aquatic Invasive Species Management Plan will help to coordinate statewide AIS management efforts, priorities, and needs. It'll help to guide monitoring and response efforts statewide, evaluate opportunities for AIS prevention, establish and maintain funding sources for spread prevention, control, and eradication, and an approved plan allows for states to apply for federal funding for implementation. This slide shows just a kind of a brief overview, kind of an outline of what we envision that the plan will include, an overall goal of to prevent, slow, manage, and mitigate the impacts from AIS, The 4 objectives would be the oversight and coordination, AIS activities, prevention, monitoring, detection and response, and then long-term control. So we're well on our way to getting an approved aquatic invasive species management plan completed. The partners are working diligently with our consultant that was hired to kind of guide the efforts. And it looks like probably the end of the summer of 2023, we'll have a draft plan completed, then with a review period and hopefully implementation by the end of or during 2024. So with that, I thank you. I appreciate your time and your participation in today's forum, and welcome any questions or comments that you have.
Yeah, Chris, great job there. I think that was really informative, exciting. I like the water body updates, getting that information out there to the anglers. Just great job, man. At this point, we're going to turn it over to questions. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Chris, please raise your hand. As we're doing that, Eric, do you have any questions in the question box you think would be nice to share here for Chris?
Not currently. I believe most of the questions in the question box have been answered appropriately, but if any more come up, I will pass them along. So again, feel free to raise your hands, folks, and ask your questions verbally.
Sure, I'll share one of the questions that was put in the question box. It's this is for you, Chris. How do these invasive species get introduced, and who is in possession of those, and how do they get introduced?
Yeah, so, one of the things is that, there's a lot of different pathways, to which they come from. The species like our Asian swamp eel, that's a very popular fish, and even the northern snakehead are very popular aquarium fish. When the fish get too large for an aquarium, somebody no longer wants to take care of it. Many times, that individual thinks they're doing the right thing by, releasing it, into a water body because they don't want to destroy it. That unfortunately is where, a lot of our invasive species come from, and what you think you're actually helping, you're doing, an extreme amount of harm. So one of the other pathways, ballast water from shipping, the round goby is probably a good example of that. Zebra mussels can be transported that way also.
I'll just add on to that too. It is no secret that at times anglers do move fish around. We know that anglers do enjoy fishing for species such as flatheads and snakeheads. We just ask you to not move fish from one water body to the next. Not only is it illegal, it's just not a great idea for our ecology of our state, as we want to maintain natural native biodiversity. So once again, never move a fish, whether you catch it, even if it's only one. You might be thinking you're doing a good thing by spreading, something like a snakehead or a flathead, because you do enjoy the recreational value there, which we can see to some degree. But at all costs, don't move fish. And the regulations currently do indicate that when they are caught, they should be humanely destroyed. Scott, do you see any hands raised there?
We got a couple. Luke, do you want to go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess I have two questions. One, your thoughts on the freshwater drum. That's really interesting. I guess, where do you think that came from? And I guess the other question too was about snakeheads. And I've noticed most of the studies are a bit in the South Jersey area, like the Delaware Tidal Basin. I know they've been moving upstream, I guess more into those tributaries, like as far north as they can in the Delaware tributaries, like more inland and stuff. I heard some reports about them going even upstream to Delaware into like the Pollenskill, I think, or one of those northern tributaries, as well as I think some old report where it's like up in the west branch of the Delaware. Do you guys see any like populations of snakehead up there actually establishing? Do you guys fear anything with maybe like how the climate has been getting warmer, any other factors? What are your thoughts about that? Just curious.
So, the first question regarding the drum, most likely that's another one that probably came from shipping. You know, that species has become well established within the Hudson River. Recently, I'd say within the last 10 years, maybe 15 years. So it's interesting to see it now become established in the Delaware. So we're thinking that's probably, I mean, we don't have any evidence to support that, but that's speculation that that's probably where, you know, where the drum have come from in the last, you know, I think it's been about 3 years since other agencies, now that we're kind of having a little more connection with Pennsylvania and some other agencies, it looks like they've been popping up for, you know, the last, you know, couple of years. And it's just that it's been, you know, this past year that our agency collected them for the first time. As far as the snakeheads go, yeah, they continue to move further and further north all the time, upper part of the Delaware, all the way up into New York. And we'll start to do a lot more surveys looking at the snakeheads up in that region too. You know, they definitely do prefer slower moving, you know, weedy, you know, muddy bottom habitat. So, you know, depending on water levels, you know, within the Delaware, there'll probably be more, you know, times of the year that they're more favorable. The fish is known to travel large distances. So, you know, if in the section of, say, just above Trenton, you know, maybe there's a 20-mile section, or maybe it's, you know, a little faster moving, a little more, you know, rocky habitat that's not favorable for the snakehead, they'll keep going until they find that favorable habitat. So that's when, you know, yes, we're absolutely concerned. You know, they can move into some of the, you know, upper Delaware River tributaries that have some slower moving water, you know, softer bottom areas where they could become well established.
Yeah, and if I could elaborate on that just real quickly, you know, everything Chris said there, I, you know, completely agree with. I just want to give further on, you know, in recent years, we have documented snakeheads in the Musconetcong River, the Paulinskill, and very recently in the Flatbrook. Not large abundances. They're probably, I'd best explain it as they're in that stage of colonizing. We don't really seem to have robust populations yet, and we hope they don't get to that level. Thanks. Scott, any further questions? Hands raised?
Yeah, we have a question from Mike Bowman. Want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Mike?
Okay, my question was, if we catch a snakehead, for example, what should we do with it? Should we release it or just kill it? What should we do with it?
Yeah, that fish has to be destroyed.
And should be any reporting that we've caught one?
Yeah, we welcome any reports. You know, that yeah, definitely. You can send us an email, call one of the regional offices. The numbers are all in the digest for any one of the 3 regional fisheries offices, or send each, you know, any of the biologists an email.
Thanks.
With that, I certainly encourage you to attach a photograph. At times, you know, snakeheads can be confused for other fish such as bowfin. So it always gives our biologists extra confidence that the angler report is accurate. So if you can please take a photograph of that fish, email that would be greatly appreciated. Scott, you have anything else?
Yep, we have a question from Ed Huntress. Ed, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Glad to see you can make it. Ed, you're still, oh, there you go.
I do it? Okay, good. Found the button. I'm not sure if this is for Chris or for Scott, but I've heard a few words about Asian carp of several varieties in the Raritan River Basin, diploid grass carp, and I thought I saw something about big heads recently. Do we have a real problem in the Raritan Basin with these Asian carp now, or what?
Yeah, I could jump in on that. Neither are a stranger to the Raritan system. We don't believe that they're in high densities. I forget the exact year, but a big head carp was reported in the main stem Raritan, you know, as long ago as maybe 15 years. There was a private hatchery that had various Asian carp on the facility that's no longer functional. There was a massive eradication project, but we don't know what happened in the interim. And as far as the grass carp, recently some surveys that were done in recent years down like in the lower Millstone River, we encountered very large grass carp. Unfortunately, we did not determine whether they were, you know, the standard diploid or if they were the sterile hybrid or the sterile triplets. But yeah, they were quite large, approaching 40 or 50 pounds. There were a few of them that we encountered. And when we do encounter those fish, during our surveys, we do euthanize them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Scott, are there any, maybe we'll take one more before we move on?
No other hands are raised currently.
Okay, great. Eric, is there anything you'd like to share from the question box for Chris?
Sure, there's two questions about invasives from Tom. He asked, do stores sell these invasive species, and do they realize their invasive nature? And do they warn buyers about the potentials of those invasive species?
I think probably the answer is yes. Stores do sell, many of the invasives, and I really couldn't answer whether they're aware or not, whether, they know they're invasive, which is part of, the need for, an aquatics plan that we were, that I was sharing that information. There's a major outreach component that's part of that, where, agencies will start to work a lot more with the aquarium trade, to kind of increase their awareness regarding these issues.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I would say that concludes the question and answer period for Chris. Now we're going to transition into the general question and answer session. Karen, if you could put that slide up for me, that would be great. At this point, kind of no holds barred. Feel free to make any questions or comments. Throughout this period, I'll occasionally flash up a poll question. I'm also, but before I do that, what I'd like to do is I would like to open up an opportunity for Fish and Wildlife staff to address anything that they may have been working on behind the scenes. In particular, we have Jeff Brust, our Bureau Chief of Marine Fisheries, who I believe has an answer to a question earlier about speed limits for boating in regards to whales.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah, sure. Great. So, yeah, good morning, everyone. Jeff Brust, I'm the Chief of Marine Fisheries here for New Jersey. There was a question earlier that I wanted to circle back on. There was, I believe the question was, is the National Marine Fisheries Service looking at changing any of the speed zone regulations to protect right whales? And the answer is yes. They have proposed regulations. Nothing has been finalized yet. But what they're looking to do, again, primarily to protect the very severely endangered right whales, is they're looking to expand the slow zones. Right now, the slow zones are generally right at the mouths of the major systems, so the Delaware, the Hudson, and up and down the coast. What they're looking to do, what they've proposed to do, is extend those zones coastwide. So not just at the mouths of the systems, but coastwide. They're also investigating whether they should be decreasing the size of vessels that have to comply with these speed zones. So right now, you only have to comply with the speed zone if you're 65 foot or bigger. They're looking at including vessels down to as small as 35 feet. So if the new rules pass, it'll be 35 feet and larger. We'll have to maintain the slow speeds, less than 10 knots within these slow speed zones. And they're also looking at making the speed zones more dynamic. So if the whales are known to be in an area that isn't currently under a speed zone, they can implement a temporary one in that area until they know that the whales have moved out. So again, those are just proposed rules. I don't know off the top of my head when those rules could be implemented, be changed to final rules, but Marine Fisheries is keeping track of it. We have submitted comments regarding our concerns and recommendations for possible changes. But if you're interested, I'm sure a quick Google search on right whale slow zones would get you an updated status of what those regulations are.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I really appreciate that. At this point, I would like to continue to offer any Fish and Wildlife staff that would like to jump in
Yeah, hi, Sean. It's Ross again. A question earlier came up about Merrill Creek, and the question asked if the sampling efforts that were done on Merrill Creek this fall for lake trout would be shared with the public, and I just want to give an update on that. So yes, we're in the process of looking at that data. We're trying to get data from past surveys that were done by a contractor that Merrill Creek's group have hired in the past. So that will help us get some past information to compare what we've collected this year. So that information, at a minimum of what we collected this past fall, will be available online, probably mostly just within our year-end report. So once that report is finalized, that'll be posted online. So take a look, keep a lookout for that or an eye out for that. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can feel free to email me directly or call the office there, and I'll try to answer what I can. So we will be sharing that information when it's available.
Thanks, Ross. This is a good time. I'm going to launch another poll question. Once again, there's going to be 2 questions here, and then we'll have like a playoff with the top answers. So what kind of content would you like to see us address at future meetings? Hatchery operations, explanation of its stocking programs, invasive species, aquatic vegetation management. And right now we have 15% of the votes in, and there's a majority leader of explanation of our stocking programs leading the way. 46% of the polls are in, 50. We'll keep that going until it hits about 75%. That seemed to be a magic number. Right now, hatchery operations are at 10% at the bottom, and explanation of our stocking programs is a dominant lead at 57%, with 70% of the vote in. Keep that coming in. We're at 72. A minute in, we're still at 72. Going once, going twice. All right, we'll close it right there at 74%. The clear leader is an explanation of our stocking programs. Second place, there's actually a 2-way tie between invasive species and aquatic vegetation management, and hatchery operations are at 10%. Let me launch the second half of the question. And right now it should say, what kind of content would you like us to see us address at future meetings? Update on dam removals across the state, the Skillful Angler Program, water body specific updates, or other. If you click other, we'll open up the floor for you to raise your hand, and then you can voice your suggested topic. So right now we're looking at 63% of the vote is in. Water body specific updates is a clear number 1 at 58%, followed by an update on dam removal projects. Third place is 17% Skillful Angler Program. The other is only at 3%. And we're in a total of 72%. I'll leave that open for a few more seconds. We're at 75%, so I will close that poll. The results are the leader at 57% is water body specific updates. Number 2 is 22% dam removal updates. Third is the Skillful Angler Program at 19%, and then other is 2. So behind the scenes, Karen is going to take the top 2 choices from the last 2 questions and combine them in a little playoff. There was 2% of folks that said other, so if you'd like to raise your hand, we could certainly call on that. We can acquire that information during the public question and answer period. So as we tabulate that, I would like to turn to Scott to see if we have any hands raised. And like I said earlier, this can be anything you want to ask us. Questions, comments, if you'd like to, mention things you like about our Fish and Wildlife programs and opportunities, or if there's suggestions or criticisms you have, we'd like to hear them as well. If you do have comments, we can utilize this online poll, which is kind of neat. So my intention here is if an angler poses a comment about one of our programs, we'll then open that up to other anglers to see if you agree with that comment or not. So Scott.
There's a question from Jim. Jim, you can go ahead.
Hi. I have been wondering for many years about the smallmouth bass stocking program. you know, there are, it seems to me that there are a lot of portions of rivers and streams that won't support trout for very long, very many weeks during the year, but would support smallmouth bass year round. And since similar angling techniques are used for both, I was wondering if there was a reason why smallmouth bass don't get more attention, and if there's any plans for changing that.
Chris, would you like to jump in and give that one a shot?
Yeah, I mean, I can. You know, I think some of that, you know, definitely as our, you know, as the other biologists, I'd say down in the waters of South Jersey where I cover, there really isn't a lot of, you know, stream type habitat, you know, per se, but I think maybe you might be referring to some of the areas up in the northern part of the state. So those recommendations would come from the regional biologist while they were out sampling, you know, possibly doing trout surveys or other, you know, other maybe warm water surveys. So it would come down to the recommendations of the biologist. I mean, I can reach out to everybody else and see if, you know, kind of put that bug in their ear of, you know, kind of, you know, those considerations in the future. Because you know, it might be something that we can look at.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, you know, a slightly different perspective. You know, smallmouth bass, they are a non-native species, but they have been here an awful long time. So we do call them naturalized. So they're part of our New Jersey flora and fauna. They're kind of ubiquitously, they're able to get around through connected rivers and streams, you know, throughout the state. So one perspective is that, you know, since they've been here so long, since they have the ability to colonize, if the river and stream habitats are conducive to, you know, fishable populations, those fish would kind of naturally expand into those habitats. So to me, I use that as an indication that if we don't have strong smallmouth bass populations in some of our northern rivers, it's probably because of other competition or other habitat or water quality factors. So I'm not necessarily sold that stocking, you know, smallmouth in some of those rivers are really going to result in a substantial fishery, because, as I said, they're very well connected in many cases, and kind of if you build it, they will come. So I guess that's a position.
One thing I'd like to speak to as the hatchery manager for Warm and Cool, smallmouth bass have typically been a hard species to raise, and there's very few states raising them. I'm not sure if that's a difficulty thing or just regional biologists are not asking for them, but best years we've ever raised was 30,000-40,000 fish. They're just not, I don't know, we just struggle with them. Like I think other states struggle with raising them. So that could be a limiting factor in the future.
All good points. I really appreciate, you know, when we all come together and give these different perspectives. Let me jump over real quick to the combined poll question here. I'm going to launch here is going to be, now these are your top 4 answers in the last 2 questions. What content would you like to see us address at future meetings? Our stocking program overview, water body specific updates, invasive species, dam removal, and aquatic vegetation. We're at 37% of the vote. Water body specific is running away with the majority at 54% right now. 62% of the vote is in, 67%. All right, keep them coming in. We're at 71%. We'd like to hear from a few more of you. All right, going once, going twice, and let's close the poll here at 74%. I'd like to share with you that the top topic here that you'd like to hear us talk more about at 50% is water body specific updates. Second place is 28%, and that's our stocking programs. 9% is an overview of dam removal, and then tied at the bottom at 6% are aquatic vegetation management and invasive species. So thanks a lot. These meetings always give us a great feel for what you want as constituents and resource users. Let me jump over to Scott. Scott, do you see any hands up?
Sure. I thought before I'd go to one of the questions with the hands up, I field one of the questions that was in the chat directed towards me was what's the status of largemouth bass in Spruce Run Reservoir? When was the last time, paraphrasing here, any electrofishing was done to assess that population? So the last time that an assessment was done on Spruce Run Reservoir was in 2015, and it was a targeted assessment for northern pike to assess the cool water fishery there, also assessed hybrid striped bass. So yeah, the last time largemouth bass was assessed was sometime before that. So it is on my radar to look at that water body and assess the largemouth bass fishery there. If you have any sort of insight or want to ask any additional questions as to largemouth bass fishery or follow up on it, you can reach out to me via email, call the office in Lebanon. But there is some raised hands as well. Luke also has his hand raised.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, so I haven't been fishing for too long as compared to other people. Maybe going on for like 8 years now or something like that. Ever since I started fishing, I've been seeing a trending decrease in public access. This has been maybe just posted signs, people owning property, but other closures as well. Maybe like, especially around COVID or that time period, a lot of, I guess, town parks, state parks, or other parks and things that are openly accessible beforehand are just kind of getting closed down. This is mostly like small ponds, rivers, smaller streams, stuff like that. I've just been noticing not serious, but maybe a bit of an alarming trend in very good public access spots just going away throughout the state. I don't like to compare states and other stuff, but I know New York does have, the New York DEC has the public fishing rights thing going on, where they kind of work with landowners and make sure sections of streams, very good rivers, large or small, are open to the public, and they work on making sure a lot of rivers and streams are staying open. I have a lot of stretches of river in mind, the Lamington, for example, Passaic, the Raritan. I know there's a bunch of different ponds down in South Jersey are getting this sort of treatment too by, I guess, towns, maybe private ownerships too. They're just getting closed. It would be really nice to see maybe if the state could maybe do what New York is doing, or is doing something similar and making sure a lot of these public access spots are staying open. Otherwise, I think this was my last question really to you guys. Thank you so much for pretty much this presentation, all you guys do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I guess one of the best ways I can answer it is sometimes public access to private lands is one issue. And that comes and goes with the property owner and their discretion. I'll kind of relate this to our trout stocking program. We do stock many private properties that allow public access. So when we see restriction of public access on private property, we withdraw the stocking point, because it's not fair for us to be stocking trout on waters in which the public are excluded. Secondly, right now we still have, let me see here, we still have 106 anglers on the line here. I do want to encourage you all to do your part. Many times when relationships between private property owners and us go awry, it's due to things such as littering. So as always, I always view an angler as somebody, incredibly respectful, both to the environment and to private property and to public property. So, but, continue to do your part and, carry out what you carry in. Unfortunately, many times, people might pull over and use a fishing spot as like a party spot. That's really beyond our control, and it's very unfortunate. I do want to acknowledge that during COVID, there were a series of particularly municipal or county parks that had restrictions. They were restricting access. To my knowledge, most of that has been opened up. So if you or any other anglers are aware of angler access that's being restricted from a condition where it was previously better, please reach out. If you can send an email, my email address is right there at the bottom of the slide. sean.kraus@dep.nj.gov. So we're always interested in doing what we can to provide information and provide public access. Scott, do you have any additional questions on there? Any hands raised? I mean.
Yeah, there's a question from Stephen.
Sean, this just goes back to since we're on the topic of access. I know I went through this. I sent a couple emails about it, but access to the park. It seems like we're going back to the pandemic issues where the park police are determining. They're basically keeping both gates locked from the Wild or the Round Valley fishing access into the park for shore fishermen. And like we had a one-off tournament a couple weeks ago. We had like 20 some shore fishermen, and like basically they all got to walk either on the rocks or down the rocks, the riprap that's there. I brought this up like a couple times over the past few years, and like if we go to the park, it's one thing, and somebody's got to step up and figure out. I mean, traditionally we've always had access, and then during the summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day, they would lock the gate, and then they would open it up at the end of the day so guys could access when the park is closed. I'm just worried, I'm just worried too that, the law enforcement officers are making rules that aren't agreed upon by us, and we're not having any input. I think it's kind of there's an issue on a bunch of levels, but the main one is access.
Yeah, Steve, I definitely appreciate you bringing this up again. And if I recall, you and I just had some email communication this week. So I did reassure you that we'll be talking with Parks and Forestry, and we'll reopen that discussion. As over time, there's staffing turnover and things like that. So
understood.
At times, folks might not understand a previous arrangement. So we do have a couple Fish and Wildlife CPOs on the call right now. If anybody's interested to jump in on that, please do.
Thanks, Sean.
But I can assure you that it's at the top of my list to make some phone calls next week to kind of see, kind of re-level the playing field and see where we're at with the property. Okay, no, thanks, Steve. Let me jump over to Eric. Eric, do you have any questions in the question box that you think should be shared with the masses here?
Yeah, I think we briefly touched on them earlier, but maybe any updates on the Greenwood Lake boat ramp situation? That was asked several times earlier.
Yeah, so Lisa addressed that earlier, and I mean, really at this point, there is no anticipated completion date, as everything right now is in the design phase. But we will keep you updated as progress is made moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. That's all I seem to have for right now. Most of the questions appear to have been answered directly in the question box, but I will keep looking. If anything pops up, I will convey that to you.
Great. To keep things fresh, let me go to another poll question. Once again, this is a pair of questions that then we'll have a playoff with the top answers. So what areas of fisheries management would you prefer Fish and Wildlife emphasize in upcoming years? Would you like us to focus more on small pond management, larger warm water lakes, water stocked with cool water species such as muskie, walleye, northern pike, etc., or small trout streams? So small trout streams, we're generally talking about, what I mean here is wild trout management. So right now we have 52% of the poll in. Man, this is split up almost 25% across the board, give or take. 62% are in. Still, man, a really even split. Right now, 21% is the low and 29 is the high. We're approaching 70%. Let's keep them coming in. Let's try to break this tie. We're at 71% going once, going twice, closed. Okay, with 71% in, we have a narrow winner here. Small trout streams for wild trout is at 30%. Second place is warm water lakes at 26%. narrow margin over small pond management, which is 23%. And then at the bottom is 21% for water stocked with cool water species. Let me share the second half of the poll. And we're going to launch that. Here, we're looking at big river system management. The next group is holdover trout lakes / lake trout / landlocked salmon lakes. Third would be for us to take a look and update our regulations. Generally, season, size, creel is kind of what we indicate there. The fourth is to look into expanding our stocking programs into new waters. And the fifth is other. So right now we're at 55% of the folks weighing in. Once again, if you vote for other, we'd be interested to hear what your intention is there for what you'd like us to take a look at. We're climbing to 63%, and expand stocking into new waters is currently in first place at 43%. And we're pretty close to a three-way tie for second right now. We have 66% of the vote in. Once again, I'd like to keep those responses coming in as we still have 102 attendees. Okay, we are at 68%, now 69. Going once, going twice, and we'll close it here at 72%. First place is expanding stocking into new waters. That's 43%. The second is 22% at looking at our holdover, our lake trout, and our landlocked salmon program. Third is big river systems at 20%. And for us to update regulations is at 14%, with other only at 1%. All right, so behind the scenes, Karen is going to take the top choices and combine them for a finals. Let me jump back over to Scott to see if we have any hands raised.
Okay, Sean, we have a question from Charles Sadowski.
Yes, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I also fish Raritan Bay. It's a saltwater question. I don't know if this is the proper seminar for this, but the fluke regulations and the striped bass regulations vary from New York to New Jersey and Raritan Bay, which makes it very difficult. You have to really identify where exactly you're fishing and what fluke you're catching and what fluke you can put in the cooler, because if you're in New York, it has to be 19 inches, and New Jersey is 18 with a slot limit, things like that. It just makes it very confusing. I'm not understanding why New York and New Jersey can't get together on the same page in Raritan Bay.
Hey, Jeff, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to find the mute button. Yeah, I can try and address that. So I appreciate the question, and it is something that we try and deal with every year, not just in New York, but also with Delaware. Quite frankly, it's something that we strive for. It just has not ever really worked out well. Our fishermen select our regulations, their fishermen select their regulations. Each state is restricted in what they're allowed to do based, or not what they're allowed to do, but what they want their fishery to look like based on their recreational quota for the year. It is something that we strive for. Certainly understand the trouble it makes for the anglers. And yeah, I appreciate the question. I just wanted to let you know that there's no easy answer, but we do try and we try and get as consistent as possible. So we'll continue working on that, and I appreciate the question.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I do appreciate your contribution as well. Let me open it up to any Fish and Wildlife employees, whether you're fisheries staff, law enforcement, information education, land management. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to address at this point? While you're thinking of that, I'm going to launch the next poll. Okay, so get yourself in line if you think you're going to want to have something, but let me launch this poll in the interim. So these are the top 4 answers of where you'd like to see fisheries management emphasize efforts in upcoming years. Small trout streams, warm water lakes, expanding stocking into new waters, and then the holdover trout lakes, landlocked salmon, and lake trout. Now with 61% of the vote in, we have 69% of the vote in. Okay, we're at 72%, 73. Let's get that engagement. Okay, 73% going once, going twice. Oh yeah, we're up to 75, and we'll close it. At 75%, the number one ranked answer at 38% is to expansion of our stocking programs into new waters. Number two is 27%, and that is additional work on small trout streams. Third place at 20% are more work on our warm water lakes. And then at 15% at the bottom there is holdover trout lakes, landlocked salmon, and lake trout. Okay, back to Fish and Wildlife employees. Does anyone have anything they'd like to contribute at this time?
Just got 2 seconds. We tried to do a little at the Hackettstown Hatchery this morning. We spawned some northern pike, and the Lebanon Fisheries crew had brought a couple big female pike in from Farrington Lake. We picked one up yesterday. It was 17 pounds, 41 inches. We did a little snippet this morning. We tried to do a little quick video that we were going to play on here for you guys to see, but didn't really pan out. But we did spawn some fish. We're up to a couple 100,000 eggs, which, you know, we've never taken eggs this early before, you know, in 27 years of messing around, spawning and collecting northern pike. So, you know, we're off to a start. You know, a bunch of other states are asking, like, what's going on? Why are you guys doing this now? And, you know, a couple of fish have come, a couple of females have come in, half spent already. So I think we're happy that we made the call and we went in early. You know, our phones are saying 3 to 5 to 8 inches of snow for Monday night. So we got big decisions to make, you know, Monday morning, whether we're pulling nets out and going to bail out for now and let the snow hit, or are we going to refreeze? You know, but that's one thing fun about this compared to a trout hatchery. You know, a lot of our broodstock collection is in the wild. You know, so we have to make, like we were saying earlier, on the fly calls. You have to monitor the weather every day because you don't want your staff to be out in a storm and a blizzard or a windstorm, whereas the trout are all in a concrete pool. You know, so I've been here 36 years at the hatchery, and that's one of the reasons why is every day is different. You know, it's kind of like Action Park. You just don't have a clue what, you know, it's bad to say that you don't have a clue what you're doing tomorrow, but, you know, it's kind of fun. So, but we're on the water. Hopefully you'll see our boat up in Swartzwood Lake in a couple weeks, collecting walleye broodstock, and you guys all have a good fishing season.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Anybody else from Fish and Wildlife at this point would like to have anything to contribute?
Yeah, Sean, it's Chris. I have, there's a couple people in the questions that were asking about artificial habitat structures and projects, just to kind of address that. So we do regularly do these type of projects. It's been a few years since we've actually completed one, but I'd say for a 10 or 15 year period, we did them pretty actively, you know, 1 or 2 per winter. In many cases, it's based on availability of free material. We use discarded Christmas trees with a cinder block tied to them. We deploy them, you know, down into the deeper areas in the lake to provide some, you know, much needed habitat in a lot of the water bodies. So somebody asked about the locations. Myself and Eric Bohm are currently looking at and working with Atlantic County Parks to do a project on Lake Lenape. That should happen probably next winter. We tried to get it underway for this current winter, but it didn't happen. So we're anticipating probably next winter we're going to do that. And then also in the next, I would say 1 to 2 years, we'd like to do a large scale project at Union Lake is another one that we're looking at. So, and then we're actually currently working with the New Jersey Bass Nation on a project, and that location is to be determined where those structures are going to be placed. That's all I have.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
And at this time, I would like to invite you know, Fish and Wildlife employees to turn on your cameras if you like. We do take pride in having, you know, relationships with our anglers. So yeah, I really like the idea of making yourselves available, so you guys get to know us. You know, we can build, you know, volunteer opportunities, partnerships, sharing information. We want to hear how these waters fish. We want to know what's good about our programs, and we want to hear, you know, criticisms when warranted. So Scott, can I turn to you to see if there's any hands available? Hands up.
Currently no hands raised right now, Sean.
Okay. Eric, do you have any additional questions you'd like to share in the question box?
Yeah, there's a couple brief questions. Luke's asking about volunteer opportunities and another volunteer opportunity at the Pequest Hatchery. Are those available and who should they reach out to?
I guess a couple different ways we can answer that. I'll give an answer kind of coming from the research and management end of our bureau. If anyone from our I&E program wants to jump in with any aquatic education, please do that. I would say that for the most part, when we're conducting fisheries surveys, we generally don't utilize volunteers. Part of the reason is there's safety issues, there's training necessary, and there's consistency in which the data are collected. For example, if we're going to be wading in a big stream, small river, and footing is important, and really concentrating on making your best effort to capture the fish with the nets. We do kind of want to have the best of the best out there and folks that are very capable. At times when we've brought volunteers out to actually be out there and collect data, unfortunately, just like the angling public seems to be kind of aged, a lot of the volunteering public seems to be aged. So at times, the habitats we're working in can be pretty treacherous. With that spoken, we do have opportunities regarding our trout program with opening day angler counts, in which we've utilized anglers to go out and monitor a trout stocked pond, lake, or stream. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out, and we're always looking to place volunteers to get that opening day angler count data. That's a very limited obligation on your part, where we basically would ask you to go out on opening day from 8 until noon, sit at a water body and see how it fishes, walk around and talk to people. That's something that we did take a break on during the pandemic for obvious reasons, but we're interested to get that back up and running.
Sean, if I could just jump in here too, just to let folks know on a broad scale that the Fish and Wildlife does have a wildlife conservation core program that is run by our information education department, but there's an application and information about the program right online. So if you go on our new website, you go to conservation, and then there's a link to volunteering, and it has information, application. Part of that application is ask some of your interests and availability. And then our program coordinator, Linda DiPiano, will then reach out as opportunities exist for volunteers. And as always, we appreciate everybody's time.
Okay, great job there. Let me see here. Do we have any other Fish and Wildlife employees who would like to jump in? Anything that they've seen either in question boxes or anything that just came spontaneously that you think you'd like to share with the public?
Yeah, this is Justin speaking. I just had a question come in from Stephen asking about some data on the Newark watershed, like Echo Lake and Oak Ridge and Canistere and all that area. Canistere's been a really good walleye has a really good walleye population, and we haven't done too many surveys on Oak Ridge yet. But however, I have plans to possibly go there in the near future. If you want to reach out to me, Stephen, via email, I can happily compile all of our information for you. It's a little bit more of an in-depth question that I might not be able to answer very quickly here. So reach out to me via email and I'll compile all that information for you.
Thanks, Justin. Scott, do you see any hands up for any more questions?
Yeah, one just went up. It's like Jan, your question?
Hey, Justin, I just following up on what you had just said. Very interesting about the Newark watershed. The walleye population, I believe, has expanded into Oak Ridge, but it would be neat to see electrofishing go on there, some sort of research or gill netting. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I haven't heard any reports of any walleye. If you have any pictures or any evidence of walleye being introduced into Oak Ridge Reservoir, I'd really like to see that. If you could send that over to me, that'd be awesome. And yeah, that's definitely something and additional reasons to get into Oak Ridge in a much sooner time frame.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I get a sense that the meeting is starting to wind down. It is 12:35. I did slate out until about 1 o'clock if the meeting was still kind of active and a lot of participation. Not quite ready to shut it down yet, but just wanted to encourage you that if there's anything you'd like to say, question, comment, suggestion, now's a great opportunity. And once again, if you're a little more on a shy side and you want to just shoot a question in the question box, we'll do our best to get to those in upcoming days. But if you have anything you'd like to add, live here, go ahead and put your hand up.
We have a question from Nick. Nick, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I put the question in the question box, but I didn't see any answer, so I figured I'd just raise it since the meeting's winding down. One of the documents that I occasionally access is the Coldwater Fisheries Management Plan from like 2004, which has just a ton of good information. You can't find it on the new website. Like the only way I can get to it now is to Google it on Google, and it pulls up the link. But if I do a search on the website, it doesn't even show up. So I'm guessing there's other things like that you may have lost in the migration over to the new website. Just wondering if you've had any other feedback on that, and if not, maybe you should think about looking into that, because I mean that a lot of work went into that document. It's got a lot of valuable information, and it's not available to the public anymore unless they make a strong effort to find it, which may not be a bad thing, I guess. But.
Yeah, I can address that, and thank you for sharing that concern. I'll make a couple points. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Justin. Justin, would you be able to go on there and find where it is? I believe the document is still there. It just may not be housed in the same place. And also, I just want to encourage you that the search bar in the new website, unfortunately, isn't very helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't really function in a way that you and I would expect it to function. So I'm going to ask Justin to find that kind of file path of where that's at. But in the meantime, since you were so interested in the Coldwater Plan, and I agree, it's a great, very informative document, we have been revising that plan. It's been we'll say a labor of love. There's a lot of things going on. Our staff gets pulled in many different directions, but we are actively working on that plan to provide an update, and we are hoping to have something released for public comment within this calendar year.
Great to hear. Thanks.
Okay, Justin, have you been able to locate the document?
Yes, I just put a link in the chat for everybody to be able to find it. Yeah, the search bar on the website definitely is less than helpful, but as Nick, as you mentioned, using Google to be able to dig it up has been the best way to be able to find it.
So, and we will periodically go back and review our website. It was a massive undertaking, as our assistant director had mentioned earlier. We had staff from throughout Fish and Wildlife really working hard to get everything converted over to the new format. And we knew along the way that there were going to be some things that would have to be repackaged and revised. So, but thanks for bringing it to our attention. It's great to hear that you're using it as a source of information. Scott, do we have any additional hands raised?
No, we do not.
Okay, and Eric, do we have any questions within the question box that you think are worthy of sharing at this point?
There's one from Rayshawn asking about the poll surveys conducted during this forum. He's curious if they're going to be, I guess, surveyed again during the trout meeting coming up next Saturday. The same polls.
Yes. Yep. Great question. Yes, we will be utilizing the polls for the trout meeting. I'm looking to have trout related questions specifically. In addition to that, those of you that will be crossing over to participate in that trout meeting, a little teaser here. There'll be an opportunity at the end where I'm going to specifically ask, what do you like about our trout stocking program? What changes would you like to see us make in the trout stocking program? So I'm going to expect anglers to participate there. We want to hear what you like. We want to hear what you don't like, because we're always looking to improve that program along with all the others. And following that trout meeting, likely taking place at the conclusion of the trout stocking season this spring, we will be launching a survey to all trout stamp buying anglers. There's going to be an email sent out. There's going to be a survey monkey put out, and we're going to be looking to really get a large sample size of and very specific questions focused on our trout stocking program. You know, as staff, we can keep our eyes open and ears open and try to listen to the public. We also have budget and staffing to consider with things. So we never like to make a decision in a vacuum. So yes, at the trout meeting, we're going to utilize the polls, knowing that that's just going to be a subset of anglers willing to give up their Saturday morning. So that'll just kind of be used to kind of guide where we might want to take the larger trout program official survey that'll likely take place, maybe in June of this year. Okay, Scott, do we have any additional hands? Eric, do we have any additional questions?
Nope, no hands raised.
Okay, any closing thoughts from any Fish and Wildlife staff? Okay, with that, I'll bring the meeting to a conclusion. Once again, we really value these meetings as stakeholder events. It's important to stay up to date with what anglers want, how waters fish, what you'd like to see in the programs. Because let's face it, most of our programs are geared towards providing the best possible fishing we can in New Jersey. We can't always make the decisions you recommend due to whether it's budget or staff or other conflicting priorities. As you can see, moving down the road, I guess you could say, like, we can't always have it all. Fisheries managers are put in a position to best manage the resource, both for native biodiversity, for the angling public, making decisions based on water quality and habitat. So, like I said, once again, thank you all for giving up your Saturday morning to interact with us. If you have any additional questions you'd like to pose in the question box, please do, and we will do our best to address those in the upcoming week. I guess that's all. Tight lines, folks, and hope to see you next week. Thanks a lot.